welcome to the Coach's Classroom, where we don't just talk ball, we teach it. My name is Scott Pellegrin, Coach Pell, and this is the first episode in the new series. Joining me today with 17 years of coaching experience, two-time head coach, former head coach of my alma mater, South Terrebonne. See it there. And currently, starting this coming year, actually in a couple days, back at his alma mater, Central Lafourche High School. One of my probably best friends in the coach profession, Coach Aaron Babin. Man, thank you for the time.
Man, thank you for having me here. I didn't realize I was the first one here, so I mean, I really feel like a guinea pig, but I relish the opportunity to talk football, talk about Central Lafourche, be able to talk some ball. Also, it's that great time of year right here. We're in the off season, and it's all optimism here. And how far can we push this and being great? And hopefully, I could do the same thing for your podcast.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And anybody who knows me knows I don't shy away from a live microphone. This isn't exactly live, but you are the guinea pig. I've done a few things with when I was at EA a couple of years ago. Obviously, I started the Zachary Football Podcast as well, and now I'm trying to do something kind of on the personal side just to have a little hobby. But anyway, you are the guinea pig, and I am looking forward to. See, I like talking to the guys from the Bayou region. That's where I'm from, so I'm pumped that I was pumped when you were at my alma mater. Now I'm pumped that you're back at yours.
Yeah.
But today's kind of topic is going to be obviously we're going to talk a lot about you, but we're also going to talk about program building as a whole. What does that look like? What does it look like with you with experience already doing it and going into a new place and what does that look like going forward? I mean, like you said, we're already excited. We're in off-season, clinic season. You're hitting the ground running now at a new place. You got a whole variety of things going on. Walk us through what you first. Actually, just walk us through the transition. I mean, you left ST. You're going to start at midterm. What does that look like for you?
I think when you start talking about that, I think a lot of people, when you think about football, you think that it starts off the school year. But if you make a change when it comes to the football program, the change for the head coach happens mid-school year. So, like, there's not this clean break. You're coming off the Christmas break. This is my second head coaching job. So this is the second time I'm kind of doing it. But what you come in with is it's a plan. And I think the hardest thing is the transition. The transition when I first became a head coach, I was leaving a school I had been at, and you have built relationships there. And then I'm leaving ST where I was a head football coach. And it's just those relationships you built there. And that's the hard part in the transition is saying bye, because everything is changing. Not that change is bad. I wanted this change for me, for a chance to come back to my alma mater. But I built relationships with those players, those coaches there, the administration, the faculty, and you understand that people that you were going to go from seeing, 5, 6, 7 times a week during the football season. That it's going to be a diligent effort on my part to make sure that you stay in contact with them and follow them.
Yeah.
All those different things. So that's kind of transition, and leaving ST or leaving a job. But like for me, as I'm taking over the new job, it is you go through the whole interview process and everything within the coaching profession. We beg, borrow, steal, manipulate it to become our own. I mean that doesn't change at any level. But for me, the interview process is huge. It takes time. The vision of what the football team is going to look like, that doesn't really change. Everybody has the same vision for what the football team is going to look like. And we know, it's going to be centered around physicality and disciplined football. And that doesn't, everybody's about that. But when it comes to the program part, a lot of people, when they think of head football coach, they think of, X's, O's, calling plays, timeouts, time management. And that's part of my job. And that's part of all head football coaches' jobs. But, I think in order for a football team to be successful, what really has to happen is this program building. And for me, that process is huge. And how do you go about it? Okay. And every place is different. And for me, with it being my alma mater and me still living in the area, had kind of, able to stay in touch and understanding kind of to a point. uh, what was going on. Not only that, but we skipped over, 17 years, but 10 of those years were at Central Lafourche. So,
Hmm.
kind of having a little bit of knowledge, I don't want to say shorten the process, but allowed me to dive deeper into it. I think than probably what some head coaches have when they are taking over a program. But for me, I think for the big thing is that I have an implementation plan, and with it
Hmm.
phases, and the first big part, and for that is it's relationship building. So I just talked about all those relationships I had at South Terrebonne, but it's the same thing, and for me it's got to be very planned out to make sure I hit everybody. You don't want to leave anybody out. You want to make sure that you're taking part of that, and we're building on these relationships, because and you talked about, you from the Bayou area, and the schools are the center of the community, and
Absolutely.
that. So you want to build relationships. You want to build it within the school. You want to build it with your new players. You want to build it with your coaching staff. You got to go in and coaching staffs and all these different parts of it, and then also within the community, because I'm from the area, but I don't know everybody, and I'm
Hmm.
on 7 years, but that's almost two full graduating classes. These seniors were like, I think I figured it out the other day, they were in fourth grade. When I left. So that it, it, although I have a relationship with the school, I have to make a relationship with these players, and everything else,
Well,
and figure it out.
let me jump in right there real quick about the relationship building. Let's talk about, there was 17 years of time that we kind of glossed over, but I want to talk about that, not necessarily in specifics, because your background, you were at Central, Vanderbilt, South Terrebonne, not back at Central, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you spent 4 years at South Terrebonne, and the similarities of the, like you said, in the Bayou region, the communities are kind of, the schools are the center of the community. And when I left the Bayou, I kind of learned, okay, well, what are the similarities of the places I'm gone to versus what I'm familiar with? And you're still in the same region. Is there a comparable, obviously, like you said, physicality, toughness, discipline, football, but as far as the personalities to build those relationships, does that look different from South Terrebonne, Berg, Montague, Chauvet to Raceland, Lockport, Matthews to Central Lafourche?
I think it doesn't look different in building them. It Once you start to understand it, it's just the same way as coaching a kid. Some kids respond differently, and they need different types of coaching to really reach them. And then sometimes, they need to understand that, hard coaching is hard coaching, and you got to take it in that instance. But when you talk about relationship building, um, you come out with a similar plan, and then how do you get about it? Is this going
Hmm.
to how are you able to get there within your school day? What does your school day look like? What time do you get out of school? So those are different things but in that, it's really being visible. Um, and being my second head coaching job, I know things that I need to tinker with in coming in new, in order to really build into it, to build better relationships in that sense within the community, and even with the players too. You want to have a personal relationship with them, but then it's also hard to have a personal relationship with 100 kids, and trying to
Yeah.
give all the amount of time that each one deserves. And so that's a big thing that I've really, going into this job, blocking off myself to make sure that I do that earlier, a little bit better, probably, than what I did at my first job. Because, coming into it, I was a position coach, I was a coordinator, and then you become a head coach, and you're going to do it. And you kind of, in coaching and teaching, and, we're in the educational profession. And for that to happen, you have to continually be learning. And that's what I've done.
Hmm.
And so I'm just trying to apply those different things. So, I think I could have a further impact on, on the community as I step into this new job, and just have relationships kind of spread out even further uh, in this opportunity that's been provided me here.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you this one thing that I didn't do a good enough job of. I like to think I didn't underestimate a lot of what being a head coach entailed. I always kind of prided myself on, hey, I paid attention to what was going on. That way, if I ever got my chance to carry the ball, but it was how difficult it was going to be to form a personal relationship with an entire team, because as a position coach, which I am now, it's easy. Those are your guys. You kind of ride or die with them. You take up for them. They take up for you in different situations, and you have those smaller group meetings and conversations and that type of thing. And then when you coordinate the side of the ball, obviously you're kind of the face of that side of the ball, and you're still kind of in the trenches with them. I find as a head coach, you're a little more removed because you have to be, because you're not just player centric. You're everyone else, administration, people out of the building, parents. Like you spend less, maybe you don't spend less time with the players, but you spend less time to personally get to know the players unless you actually carve the time out. And going into my second year, if I'd have got a chance to do it, that was one of the big criticisms I have for myself. I'm like, no, I got to make time for one-on-ones. I'll sacrifice literally anything else, but I got to make time for one-on-one with everybody. Because if they're not going to ride or die with you as a team, like they do when they're a position group, if they don't know you that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of it. And then sometimes it's just saying, well, this guy, um, didn't feel like you talked to him enough, and I try to do that. And for me, it's something I started doing as a teacher. But I just try to tell him good morning when I see him. Even something simple like that. It's a starting place, and then
Yeah.
with stuff like that, for me at South Terrebonne, I was lucky because I had all the kids in a lifting class, so I at least saw my
Mm-hmm.
players. At different places, and that isn't always the instance, just because size, everything else with that, and that's as a head coach. Um, and how that exactly is going to look here, it's going to be one of those things I'm still going to have to learn. Like that learning doesn't,
Yeah.
and it's not, and that's the biggest thing. Like you talk about being ready to be a head football coach, like, and I would say this definitely about me prior to becoming a head coach. Like it was very much all X's and O's eccentric, like it was
Mm-hmm.
all plays and development, and how do we develop them as players, and technique and fundamental, and like you said, and then the natural relationship part within a group was easy to get done because there were so few. Even
Mm-hmm.
there was you had 20 in a group, but that's 20. That's not 100. That's not 60. That's whatever the
Yeah.
number for the instance, or um
And it doesn't scale up as easy as you think it would, you
no,
know?
because all of a sudden you wind up in a deep conversation uh, about scheme with one kid, and then you had that 30-minute time blocked off to do. Well, I was going to do this, and all of a sudden that time's gone, and maybe that was another meeting you had planned, or whatever
Yeah.
you say in that instance. It's just but like that's all part of it. I think that's a huge part of it is that relationship. Actually, I pose a question to you because you grew up here, like you said, you were an ST alum, um, and then you're in a different area now. How's that comparison? In dealing with those things right there, leaving, and are there comparisons there and whatnot between the areas?
When I worked in Ascension Parish, so I mean, without going too far in my background here, I've worked in a city school twice
Hmm.
since I moved here. Been here almost 7 years now. I think 7 years. I worked in a city school twice. I've been in community schools every other time. So the community schools were almost exactly the same.
Okay.
Gonzales, Ascension Parish, when I was at EA, I mean, it was exactly the same. Now that I'm in Zachary, to me, it's even maybe not necessarily smaller in like population, but smaller as in like we're sectioned off. We're our own school district. So, it's exactly the same because people have that pride in their school. And even
Yeah.
if I'll use Ascension Parish because it's shaped like Terrebonne Parish geographically, even if your kid went to Sanoma or Dutchtown, but your kid goes to EA now, well, I'm a Spartan. You know what I'm saying? And you're all into that. So people love their team around here, and they love to show their colors. A lot like down there.
Yeah.
One of the things when I was down there that it broke my heart was when I was at South Lafourche, and this is not a knock for anybody who sees this, it's just my take on it. South Lafourche, I found, didn't always see those comparisons. They're like, "Oh, you're from South Terrebonne, it's different." I'm like, "No, it ain't. It ain't different at all." we lose kids to the private schools because those parents make that decision. You know, we do have the same after school activities. They fish and hunt and they, whatever. And they work during the summer and it literally was no different. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Other than, but that's one of the cool things about the community schools is just that the pride they take in it. So like on one hand, it gets annoying when people say stuff like that, but on the other hand, that's what makes you crazy makes you great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's such a pride thing, and like for me, always being in kind of this area, I want to say kind of in this area, that's exactly what you see, the pride when you move from one school to another. And for me, first 10 years were at Central Lafourche, and like I was curious also when I first left, like how is that? And then you see like everybody has their own tradition. They're not all the same or even close to the
Mm-hmm.
same sometimes, but they all have their own traditions, their own pride, their own history. And I love that. Former history teacher, love the history aspect when you start getting into these schools and what is it like. And, and all the schools I've been out, very proud history of success within the football programs and trying, you know, and taking over another program as a head coach, bringing that back. And then how do you bring that back? For me, is how do you bring that back and make it look like 2026? And I was about to say 2025
Yeah.
since it's January 2nd, but it's 2026. How do you make that match? Okay, and you have your ideas, and then even though you're from the area like I am, you still want to dig into it. What do they see? Like I said, 7 years gone, and it's not like I was completely detached. But like when football season came around, I was,
Things have changed.
tunnel
Yeah.
vision on, doing my job, completely bought into that, and loved where I was at, and but how do they see it? What do they see? And just because Aaron Babin views it a certain way when it comes to tradition doesn't mean it's all viewed that way. And you
Mm-hmm.
got to take that into account. I think that's a big deal. And just trying to see that, and it makes it exciting. And I don't even think I said this yet on the podcast, but like I am excited about this opportunity. I mean, to have this job at a place where I grew up and watched football games growing up, then played here, like and coached here too. But like I can't even. There's
It's a full
not
circle moment.
correct words. It's full circle, absolutely. But I can't properly describe how excited I am about this opportunity. I can't fully describe how uh, I've always thought about football since I began coaching. Like it's what I think about probably the most right after my family, my immediate family, my wife and kids. It's football, and like it's the same, and there's an energy about it that I can't fully describe. I think you did a great job with full circle. Like I am completely excited to do this, and like I want to coach this team. Like we always can't wait for football season, but like I'm really I'll even say it, I'm geeked up. Like I'm at that point,
Right.
and just
And
excited. Like that's why when you asked me about doing this podcast, I don't even think I hesitated. I was like, I just want to talk Central Lafourche football. I want to talk Central Lafourche football. We could talk some regular football. We could talk program building, but like I just want an opportunity to get it out there. And that's why I kind of pivoted right here. But like I just to say how excited I am to be back in Matthews in Trojan territory and the chance to lead this team. I can't describe it appropriate.
that's awesome. And I think there's a lack of good coaches in general, and there's a lack of teachers and there's a lack of everything. So we ain't got to go into that. But I think that to still have guys who are, I guess, in our age group in their 30s who are excited about making these moves and not just being complacent in one place or just not afraid to leave or get out their comfort zone and leave. Like you did, you went to from Central to Vanderbilt, which is a different situation, and to South Terrebonne. So you spent the last 7 years in Terrebonne Parish, which while similar, like I said, like different school communities. And then now you get a chance to come all the way back home and be excited about it after you went out and learn some new stuff. And we've talked about that before with, talking about other people and other people in the profession. It's, being able to branch out and go learn new stuff. Like I ain't gonna lie, when I moved to Baton Rouge, I was like, all right, we go see what you're worth now, because it's the first time you're away from home, gonna work and live somewhere else and try to be immersed in that area. And you know, things like that they're scary at first, but like you said, like once you learn that, hey, yeah, I mean, you can see the helmets behind me. Like I've been to probably more schools in 14 years than I care to admit, but to me, you can't be afraid to make moves and get out your comfort zone. I think that's what it's all about. And it's awesome to hear how excited you are. But I want to pivot here a little bit. So, uh, taking over Central Lafourche football, you have 4 years of experience. You took over a program that was storied in its own right at South Terrebonne and kind of restored them back to respectability. What does that plan look like at Central? I mean, I know we're going to build relationships. You're going to be in the community. And I mean, you being from there and all, but what does that look like in the building? Where does it start? Does it start in the weight room? Does it start installing scheme? Does it just evaluating players? How does that process look? Because you were telling me before we started rolling tape, like you were mopping the floor. You know what I mean? What does it look like taking over realistically?
I think I want to quantify, mopping the floor. One of the things that it's kind of like one of my like nervous ticks that I have is like I clean my desk all the time because I eat at it probably on a daily basis. So just your regular cleanliness to do with that. But then you're moving into a new area and you move some things around and not that I'm going to be moving my desk all the time. So like just in doing that, cleaning and mopping and making it my own was kind of part of it. But like when you start talking about the actual program building, I think we referenced it earlier. You have a vision for what the team is, okay, and with that, the program, and maybe for somebody that you're listening to this, and you're like, well, what's the difference between a team and program? So the team is different every year. The team changes year to year, and there's always team building that has to happen. But the team changes year to year. The program, and this is important, the program is what you come back to at your 10-year anniversary for homecoming. The program is what you
Yeah.
follow year to year. And that the program is to me the most important because the team is a part of the program. So the program has to
Mm-hmm.
be built on these different aspects of it. And just like you said, I'd like to say, it'd be one aspect of it, in my 90-day plan for the spring semester. The first part is relationship building. We kind of already hit on that, but a big part of that first phase, the first 90 days is it's relationships and observation. Okay, so like when you start looking at it, for me, I consider myself a weight room guy. Got to observe in the weight room. Where are we? What is our clean technique? What does that look like? What is our squat technique? Is that good? Is it there? Do we need to break it down? Go back to basics? Is it just that they were good at it, but it's been a long, they've been in a certain phase, and we just need attention to detail on it. I think that's part of the weight room. So you got to observe it. Okay, what does that look like? And then in that building some relationship, it's not. I don't think I'm going to coach it the exact way in those first 30 days as I will from day 68 per se. Once everybody's kind of understanding of each other and all those different things to get it done. I think the weight room is a big part of that observation. Also, observing, players you talk about it. I think a big part is who was on the team last year. I have that roster and I've tried to meet them. I've been fortunate enough to meet some of them already. But continuing that, recruiting our own hallways. Anytime there's change, there's an excitement about it. So can you get maybe some more involvement in? And when I'm saying involvement, of course we're talking players, but what about auxiliary staff, auxiliary student involvement, whether it's coming to filming, medical, with athletic trainers and stuff like that? Can
Your
we expand it there just to
I'll
make it
throw you one. Your
better?
social media team. That's something you need now in 2026.
Yeah, you talk social media and like you said, I'm in my 30s and I'm going to hold on to being in my 30s for as long as possible. But like for me, and that's something that I have to delegate to somebody else because I'm not a social media guy. Like I'm excited about this podcast, like I talked about already, but at the same point, like I don't even know if you'd say I'd have a presence on social media, but my presence is the football program, trying to push it out there as best as I can. And
Yep.
and we talked about improving. I think that is something I need to improve on because at South Terrebonne at my last school, those kids worked hard. And I think it's going to be the same way here at Central. And it's just to highlight the work they put in, because I think a lot of that goes unnoticed, except for the people that know, "Well, man, they had workouts today, they had practice today." Like, you have that. Like, it's not just Friday nights. Yeah, Friday nights is the payoff. That's the
Hmm.
easy part. The hard part is, the last day of spring before the spring game, whether it's an inter squad or against another
Yeah.
school, the last summer workout, any kind of conditioning testing, like all of that. So, like you said, social media team, who wants to be part of that? So, anybody listening that goes to school and you want to be part of the social media team, please come talk to me. Help me out.
And I say that to mess with you because I know that's one of the things you're
I
not a
know.
big fan of. So. But dude, I learned that at Woodlawn. Like I kind of went in there. Okay, I'm gonna run it if I can't find anybody to run it. But holy crap, there was a bigger undertaking than I thought it was because we had a graphics program. We had stuff you could to make it pretty, but holy crap, like that was a whole job in and of itself. That would have been a whole lot better to have a student crew to do. All right, so we just took a little pause right there, a little technical issue, but we're back in business here, and we'll just jump right back in. You're recruiting the hallways, and you're recruiting, kind of ancillary staff, got people to help film, people to help with your social media presence, people to maybe help the training staff. That's all part of your program building. So just continue talking about what the steps look like. You said you were observing guys in the weight room, and you're recruiting for ancillary staff, probably coaching staff.
While we're talking about, players, future players, students, stuff like that, for me, another big thing is alignment. And I think that's big. Everybody talks about it, but, alignment with the middle schools. Okay. I've already talked to their football coaches, and trying to get that alignment done and becoming visible to those players coming from the middle schools. We get at Central Lafourche, we get three middle schools that feed us, which is Raceland, Lockport, and Bayou Blue. Being over there for them, seeing me, and then how many coaches can I get there too, and then for us, we have Bantam football, which is like our rec league, and even starting to work with them. And I'll say I haven't reached out to them yet, but that's part of the process in that first 30 days, and you know helping them in any way, shape, or form that's possible, so that this alignment is from our Bantam league all through Central Lafourche High School. And I think that's part of it too. I think that's
Mhm.
part. When you talk about recruiting to Central Lafourche High School is getting to those kids that are going to come to us, for the most part, and getting
Right.
that. And then you talked about it here, and something I didn't touch on yet is coaching staff. You referenced it earlier. You know, there's not a plethora of teachers, coaches out there right now, and it's reaching out to those guys that are on staff, and that's part of the first 90 days. I'm sorry, first 30 days, and that's been done, not completely, but and for that part, and saying it this way, when you're taking over, I don't think you can just get rid of everybody. I don't think that's how it works. But I think what's
Not in high
super,
school. Not in high school.
not
It's
not
tough.
not where we're at. But I think if they're
Hmm.
in it for the right reasons, but you have to make sure that you align also. I think, and it's spelling out what my vision of the program is. How are we going to do things? And it's not to say that the way they did it in the past was wrong, because that's not the case. It's just, this is how we do it because now I'm in charge, and this is how I want to break these things up. This is how we need to go through it, and this is how it. I've had success with it being done, and you spell that out, because for some people, they decide that that's not how they, or they can't do it, or they don't want to do it that way, and then in the first 30 days they, I don't want to have that. But I'll say in this would be in my second job, I haven't had that yet. And technically the 30 days hasn't started either, but I've been having the job for 3 weeks, and I've been trying to reach out to all these guys and talk to them. And this is it, because, and look, we didn't even really get into the program nitty gritty of it. But like, hey, one of my big things with the program is I want to develop. are athletes. Okay. And I just called them athletes because that's what they are, but they're really student athletes. And I want to develop them. But it goes the same way with the
Mm-hmm.
coaching. It goes the exact same way with the coaching staff. I want to develop coaches, and you could talk about, different things when it comes to coaches. Some guys are just football coaches. They could go coach football. They could coach with me at Central Lafourche High School, or they could go to Alaska and coach football. And they're still going to coach football because they have a love for football. Doesn't matter where they're at. Or they're community guys, and I
Right.
think
Right.
you have aspect of it, and figuring out who each one is important because that can also determine the
Mm-hmm.
job to supplement me. We already talked about a delegate, because one person isn't going to make the deal. Like, as excited as I am, as hard of a worker
Mm-hmm.
as I think I am, Aaron Babin alone is not turning this around. It's got to be. It's a whole thing. I
No.
mean, it has alignment. Going all the way up through leadership here, which I think we have, and constant communication here. But then within the staff, we talked about this with the relationship building. Yes, some of those position coaches are going to have better relationships with some of these players than me, just because of lack of time. Because I keep asking, but nobody's extending the day to give me more than 24 hours in a day. And if you ever get that done, make sure you share that secret with me. But you know what I'm saying? So like it's a whole community effort when it comes to this. And part of the coaching staff too, as you build these relationships, and how you can develop them, and not just the players, but then the biggest part of it is once they're in with you and you know who your coaching staff is. Now it's all about the players, and that's really what the focus is about, is how are we going to
Mm-hmm.
develop players academically. I have a plan for that. How we're going to go about it, and I have to like I said, part of the observation is being able to go through and say, okay, who's a strong student, who's a weak student, how do we go about this, how's our school day set up, where, how's that it, how do we make sure that they're getting some of this, especially when it comes to football season. And you're talking about, we got practice and we got game plans and we got film review. Okay. How do we make sure that they're, taking care of business in the classroom also? And how can we get all those
Mm-hmm.
different done? And then we already kind of alluded to the weight room. Football is one of those sports where you spend a lot of time in the weight room. And the weight room is where, I believe this wholeheartedly, it's where you win and lose games. It's a way for you to actually simulate to a point the physicality of the
Yep.
game through the weight room. And that's why it's so important to football. Is just how can we
Well,
get some physicality done out of season.
and you spend so much time in season in the weight room too.
Oh,
How important is in season lifting? Other sports don't always subscribe to that, but I know that in football that it's mandatory. You can't just work out in the off season and think, oh, I'm gonna take it easy in season. Hell no. That's where you prevent injuries. That's where it almost ramps up in season in a different way.
yeah, in season, it's not that you stop lifting. In season, what happens is now and it's not a maintenance thing. Because I'll tell you this, in season for me, my big belief in season is this is a great time for us because we're not going to be getting those maxes, and we're not overloading in this part. But it's a huge technique time. Like, this is a great time to
Yeah.
make sure that our technique's clean, and all those different things, and give us maybe some different focuses. And then actually it falls really hard on the strength and conditioning coach, as we're looking at the schedule. Okay, when are we raising percentages? Where are we dropping reps at? How does this look? Where do we need to be? Okay, are we working out 3-4 days a week? Okay, maybe that was a super physical game.
Mm-hmm.
We might go down to 2 days a week here, or if not, we'll just deload more than we anticipated as a way to make sure we're taking care of the bodies. I mean, all of that's part of it. I mean, weight room's huge. And then, and then at the same point, the whole point of being in the weight room is for the adaptation, for us to be better football players. And then you have to work out in a certain way
Mm-hmm.
that adaptation. And it's just, it's never ending.
So I want to go back to something real quick. I want to talk about the coaches for a second. I know we're not, we're going to wind down pretty soon, but I've always kind of said you got to take care of the people that take care of the players, because it is all about the players. You also got to
Yeah.
take care of the people that take care of the players. So, and you talk about finding what their motivation is. And I think in community schools, that's huge, because even up here where you think like there's a little bit more people bouncing around, and there's a little bit of it, but they still have people who are wherever they live, that's where they are, whether they're from there or not. And I'll tell you a story about Brew, and not being able to fire coaches and doing all this. And I don't think he'll mind me telling you this. When he got to Zachary, he had autonomy over the coaching staff. He did. It was, however that took place, he was allowed to do whatever he needed to do based from administration. And he brought 2 coaches with him, an OC and a DC. And then admin told him, hey, we really like, so and so and so and so and so and so. Give him a shot. It's up to you, but give him a shot. See what happens. And there's like 4 or 5 guys that are still from the previous head coach that are still there 12 years later, going on 13 years later. So it goes to show you that there can be buy-in. I feel like a lot of times nowadays you see what you see on TV and it's like, okay, well, so-and-so got hired. He's cleaning house. Well, it's college football. It's a little different. And it's not that simple just to replace guys. One, I always went into I've only had one job, but I went into interviews thinking, okay, well, that's cool. I'm going to have to keep probably the majority of these guys. Great. But to me, finding their motivation, like that one that you touched on, it helps them figure out what role they're going to play in your program. If, maybe there's a community guy who's just going to ride or die for Central. Great. I can find a spot for them. Maybe they're a guy who aspires to move up. Then maybe they get more responsibilities, right? So that's always, to me, that's a big one when you're trying to figure out how kids tick, but you always got to figure out how the adults tick. And like at Woodlawn, I brought in 2 people and I kept the rest. And then once you figure out how people tick is how you figure out how they fit in your program going forward. And I think that's huge.
And I think, yeah, absolutely what you're saying. Because like you said, like we are, and I think back to when I was growing up, like there wasn't as much football and sports on TV as there is now. And what we see is, it's not a lot of FCS games on TV. It's Power 4. It's these major programs that are rolling with these huge budgets. And sometimes I think just because of proximity, maybe your kid plays high school football, and you're a fan of a certain college team. For most people down here, it's LSU, but whatever it may be, and you think that works similar. Well, there's similarities, but it's not similar, and I think that's important. Like what you're talking about, it's not cleaning house because, like I said earlier, if they're coaching, they're in it for the right reason. They probably got in it for kids and for the players. So then it's like I said, it's an interview process in order to give it a title. But it's like you said, it's finding their tick. What is their niche that they want to and is within our program? And then how can he do that for us to have the greatest impact on our players to maximize their potential while they're in high school? And when I talk about maximizing,
and it's a lot more give and take with the adults than you like it to be, but it is.
But it's but it's being a grown up. I sometimes I want to go back to being in high school, and even though I'm working in a high school, that's not it. It's being a grown up and understand. And I have been blessed with a great opportunity to be the head football coach at Central Lafourche High School, and my second head coaching job, I was blessed with the same or a similar opportunity at South Terrebonne. And what it is how do we maximize the potential of our players? And when I say that, I mean that both athletically and academically in order to push them. And when I say push them, I kind of mean push them here and push them to be greater than they ever anticipated. Because you're a coach.
Yeah.
When you can, and we kind of change the way we look at people as you get further and further into coaching, because you're looking at them frame wise. What is his body composition? Okay, how do we make that look? And that goes into some more weight room talk if we ever do it again. But you're looking at it, and then how do we take this group of grown men, for the most part? I know some people do have females on staff, and I'm not discriminating against them. It's just everywhere I've been, it's always been all male, and it looks like it's going to be the same way here. And how do we get that to push them forward? Actually, I'm forgetting one of the greatest resources I had an academic advisor or coordinator, however you want to say it. She was a librarian at South Terrebonne, and she really helped us out academically and doing grade checks and checking with kids and getting them help and helping them herself and bringing up possible situations or just, hey, this kid was a B student and their grades lower now. Can you just talk to them? And I thought that really helped us out a lot. In making sure that we just stayed on the academics part of the kids. And
Did
looking to do the same thing
did
here.
she do that for the football team, or she did it for like other students too?
It started with us, and then I'm pretty sure she was doing it for almost all of athletics.
That's
By
awesome. That is awesome.
and she came volunteer. Like I was, trying to do it myself and everything else, and she brought it. I'm pretty sure to basketball, baseball. I know she spoke to me about it and said she was doing it. I'm sure she was doing it for other sports too, but looking for the same thing here, and who exactly that person's going to be. That's part of the first 30 days. Like
Mm-hmm.
observing who's kind of looking to be part of it, but maybe not coach and those different things, and that's exciting because you bring it out there, and sometimes people think it's all balls. You got to know X's and O's, and that's not the case. In order for it to work, like I said, it's alignment all the way down from rec league through Central Lafourche High School. From kids six to 18, and how can we affect them in a positive way, in all these different aspects. And that's part of being a football program, and that's why a lot of times when I talk, I talk about the program, because when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about the team, you're talking about the players and the coaches a lot, but the program, all those auxiliary positions are so instrumental to you being successful. And when I say you, I mean me or you as a coach or any other coach.
the the best schools and the schools that truly have it together. I mean, we can go shoot. You can write a dissertation on what that is, but I think if you boil it down to this conversation, one of the qualities those schools have is they understand that it is a program, total school effort to make the athletic department work, and more specifically the football program. There is a grade component. There is all of those things, and who checks it, who runs your social medias, who helps you film the games, who you know. Here's one for you. What are the themes for the games? The student dress up themes. When I got asked that question, and look, I've been at schools where the head coach had some say over when homecoming was and that, like the major events and stuff. Fair. Senior night, homecoming, fair. I looked at my AD and I said, Coach Broussard, I love you and I appreciate you asking me, and I want all the control I can get. Don't get me wrong. I don't care if the students are wearing neon one week, togas the next. Do what they feel like doing. I just hope they show up to the game. But stuff like that, like it
But I
you
think,
almost never know,
and look,
that
I was in the same boat as you. I was in the same boat as you. But then, as you start getting into it, at South Terrebonne, I stole it from my baseball program and Coach Mike Barber. They do a cancer baseball game,
yeah.
so I went a cancer football game, and and so when you do that, it goes back to alignment, and you try to align that so that the school knows, so that that game is a pink game, and
Mm-hmm.
you have that, and but that goes to alignment and communication and all those different things to get that in. What about military nights and different
Yeah.
things of that nature, youth nights, at South Terrebonne it's Little Gator nights, having uh,
Mm-hmm.
well, how are we going to get there and have future Trojan night, is the middle school and the band on the same night, or do we do that different? And that's all part of fit as much.
And,
I consider myself a planner and a preparer, but
mm-hmm.
some time and you got to get your feet on the ground and say, okay, how does that work, in order to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck and you're affecting, and in this case bang for your buck is getting the community involved. What if
And
there's something going on at one of the middle schools, that middle school can't show up, so trying to
right.
early enough but not too early to where it's forgotten also.
Well, look, coach, I'll tell you a quick story about planning a special night. In Ascension Parish, shirt off your back is huge. And I know some people have brought it down to other areas or whatever, but this is the first place I've ever seen it. It's basically teacher appreciation, but you give them a shirt with the jersey number and you write them a letter, and it's real cool. They get recognized at the game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I got to Woodlawn, I wanted to do something similar, but I was at EA. We had like those people you're talking about, that ancillary staff. We had peripheral people involved in the program that handled that. They pulled the players. They gave them the paper to write the letter on. They ordered the shirts. They did all that. And I got to Woodlawn. I'm like, hey, Broussard. I said, hey, bro, is there anybody here that helps us with things like that? And we ended up trying to build that. We had somebody on our teaching staff who was an assistant soccer coach or whatever, and she helped us with a lot of that stuff. But that was as the season went on. The second year and the third year would have been much more efficient with somebody like that helping me out, kind of helping me be my right hand on some of that stuff. But that first year was like, man, the coaches did it. We did it. We had, me and Storm were sitting there with all the seniors. We're passing out the purple paper with the letter that way, hey, write a letter to your teacher. It ended up being a cool deal, but as a planner, it's like, man, this could have been way better. You know what I mean? You're always like, man, we could have scored another point. We could have got another stop. At peripheral stuff, as much as it could be a pain in the butt, like, you really realize what those people you lean on in your building do that aren't coaches, if they do it for you.
Let's take a football term here, self-scout. I mean, you got to of after every season and stuff like that. How do you make it better? And then, I'd love to say every time you self-scout, it's a workout, but sometimes it doesn't. You make a small change. It's like, man, it was better the original way. And that's all part of it. But
yep.
I think, and I really believe this, when you're showing attempts like that, it doesn't go unnoticed. Sometimes for us, we want things to be perfect because, you're trying to present this and you understand, people are looking forward to it and you got to do it. And it's just different ways that it happens. And, stuff like that, like you calling a shirt off your back. I've seen it's a night for the teachers, all those different things. And I think they're wonderful. I never got I've never done one of those as a head coach. And I think that is important. I think that is important, for the faculty to know, not only that you're supporting them in the classroom, but then, what players, really look up to them within the classroom. They might seem disinterested. They might be doing well in the class, but seem disinterested, but they really love XYZ, whatever that subject may be. They just don't portray it that way to them because
Coach,
teachers are sitting in there with 30
seeing
kids.
The letters on the teacher's bulletin board, man. That was cool. And they loved it too. They loved to display it. As we start winding this down, do a little rapid fire word association with you. So I'm gonna give you a term, a word, or whatever. You just give me a few words. First thing that comes to your mind. All right. Culture.
Team. The team's going to reflect the culture, whatever it may be.
Accountability.
Truth. The truth comes out. If a kid's truly accountable, he's going to tell you the truth on why. And when you talk about it here, when you're talking about accountability, most of the time you're talking about when they messed up. And you just want to know the truth. Why? Why didn't you be the contain player there? Or why didn't you block down? Right. Or why did you not use the proper technique there? And accountability is directly related to me being truthful.
Central Lafourche High School.
Rivalry week. That's it. Rivalry week, baby.
Last couple things. Top of your head, favorite coaching moment ever.
Okay, so I got to tell a story with this one. Okay, so I meet with one of the middle schools, and a kid asked me that, and I think I rattled off like 20 moments. I mean, there's so many. Like you said, I haven't done it 30. I've done it 17, but there's so many moments that, like, to say one is unfair. I think as I'm sitting here doing this interview in Central Lafourche, I think probably one of the best moments, because you said coaching, so I'm thinking game. We beat a team in a 2 minute drive with less than 20 seconds, and it might have been one of the loudest stadiums I've ever been in high school, and it was just awesome. But I mean, there's so many other moments. I could think of my first one as a head football coach. I think about the relationships too that I've built with players, over 17 years. Those are the things that come to mind when you talk
Mm-hmm.
about my favorite coaching moments.
Yeah, it's hard to beat winning in the last seconds. We had a situation we went for 2 and won it. Like, those things are obvious, but like you said, some of that other stuff is kind of, my first win was a blowout, but it's like, man, it was so. I
It was
remember
awesome.
watching the clock tick to 0. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it was awesome.
Dumbest thing you ever did as a coach?
I'm not saying that on a podcast. I'm not saying that. But look.
Best
I'll
of,
put it this way. I guess to answer the question, I'd have to go to my early years where I thought I knew what coaching was, and
yeah,
reflecting back on those probably first 2-3 years of me coaching, and just being like, man, I was so far off.
yeah.
It's just probably part of it. It was just.
Being ashamed of your youth. I think that's all of us.
Isn't that true through everything, not just coaching?
Ain't no doubt. All right, last one. Best advice you ever received?
Oh man, that's hard. That's
That's
hard.
a tough one.
I think when you look at that, I've been so fortunate to be around so many great coaches in my career. Going back to being a player here at Central, and then even as a coach here, and then some of the other stops I've been at, and I can't say one thing, but the
Mm-hmm.
fact that I don't think it was advice as much as the fact that they reinforced to me that I was a good coach. When you have
Yeah.
those negative moments that come into your mind, and maybe I'm not or whatever. I've had coaches, whether it was Keith Menard, Lance Leday, Tommy Minton, Bill Hawkins, these guys that have been around me that have reinforced that, hey, you're good at what you do, and just stick to it, and you're not far off. Just get it out of this negative moment you're in, and you're on it. And I think any kind of advice I got from that was really what I hold near and dear to the heart.
That's the mark of a good teammate, coaching wise. Whenever they could give you some affirmation in a negative moment, you know what I mean. When
Yeah.
it's like, look, we're there. We got Coach Babin, man. I appreciate the time. I know we had a couple of hiccups, but that tends to happen sometimes. But I'm gonna get this posted up on YouTube hopefully soon and get it shared out there. I know you probably want to share it with some of the people because you spoke a lot about some of your plans and what it looks like being down there again and being in the big chair, man. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. One, all the technical difficulties, Scott, I'm going to put those on you. It had nothing to do with me.
100%. Got to get better. Got to get better.
Yeah. But we're going to say it's because it's the first one. And then,
Right.
lastly, just once again, going back to the excitement level, I'm excited to be here. I can't wait for football season, but there's a lot of work that needs to go into it leading up to it, getting this off season underway and getting prepped and getting ready, to be competitive come the fall. And and look, I'll say this because I know you coached against Central. I can't wait to watch that horse run out for the first home game. Like I am jacked about that prospect.
Well,
Looking forward to it. Look, man, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity, to kind of spill my thoughts, be able to talk about Central Lafourche. And if you ever want to do it again, you get some good following from this one. I'll definitely jump on here and talk about some Central Lafourche football again.
absolutely, man. I don't know if it's a good following, but we'll get a few views, and I'm sure your phone's gonna ring because I know as coaches we're always looking for advice, and I know I was taking notes. You dropped a few nuggets in there that I'm like, yeah, I could see this person probably gonna want to talk to him about this, and this. So, but man, I appreciate it. This has been the Coach's Classroom. Like I said, whether we don't just talk ball, we teach it. Man, Babin, I appreciate it, and we're out.
Later, man.